And the strangeness, well, it begins in the very first scene of this book and probably of your arrival. Do you want to share what happens in that scene?
Serena arrives actually at the Miami airport, and she, her mother, who is... There's
a whole book in itself, I think.
Her mother. How do you explain Serena's mother? Let's see. Her mother, who is really trying to become somebody, really trying to, be important in the world, be seen more than anything, brings all kinds of herbs which she believes are magical and to the United States, and she didn't realize that she could not do that. So, and these herbs are very important to her. And they go into the airport and they open up the bags and they find these herbs and they take them off to the back and have them waiting and are trying to find out whether the herbs are drugs or what they are. And it's a very scary moment for Serena and her sister. And for the mother, in a different way, the mother is worried that they're going to take her herbs and take her luck away more than, it's a difficult scene. But they do get out without their herbs, and off they go into the United States and start their journey in very different cultures and very different, atmosphere.
And the mother has a very strong sense of the gods and the mystical and magic and superstition, and does tarot cards and whatever. And it struck me the second time I was reading this book that it doesn't have magic realism of the kind we associate with Latin American novel. Mm-hmm. But what it does have is almost everything associated with Curaçao is suffused with magic and with traditions and with the lore of the gods. And everything connected with California is very real life, unflinching reality. And it's almost in that first scene as if she's kind of trying to import some magic into California, but it's confiscated because they assume it's illicit substance and no magic allowed here. And that sort of sets the tone for everything that that develops subsequently. I mean, because the gentle, I won't say clash of the cultures, but the constant mutual bewilderment of the cultures it starts on that first scene and goes through the whole book, I think. One scene that I love, I don't know if you want to read from it or explain it, is when they go to the Pussycat Go-Go Club.
And that passage, they had arrived in California and they were completely out of money, and they needed cash immediately, and they had found a advertisement that said go-go dancing, and they thought, let's try that and at least we can get some money for food.
And I think one thing I love about that passage, which goes right the way through the book, is, of course, it's very funny. Mama, volunteering, the guy saying, no, I want the daughters. And it's very fresh because it's a completely understandable mistake. You go and you see a dance club, why not merengue or salsa? But also it's really heartbreaking. And as the novel begins, this completely innocent misunderstanding begins, like many of them, to have really tragic consequences. And that speaks to the kind of thing that any one of us could run into. There's, at one point, as I recall, I can't remember, it's just before or just after, the Mama character thinks that Hollywood Boulevard is a cemetery because she sees all the names and the stars on it. And if you're walking down the street and you see a name and a little memorial, why not? It makes absolute sense. And yet, if you know the context, it's funny. And if you don't, anyone could do that. And right the way through, it's that completely fresh perspective on the things that we sort of sleepwalk past. And yet they're always walking against the culture and ending up where they didn't want to, I think.
Yeah.
And I remember, because as I said, I came to California just a few years before you, and I was a 7-year-old boy from England. And when I tell people now that we knew everything about California because we watched Lucille Ball and the Beverly Hillbillies, they think I'm being facetious, but no. And California has that different dimension, even London or Paris or Amsterdam has, because everyone coming thinks they know it, and they think they know what is possible there, and they're surrounded by images of it, but all the images are taking them to a California that they never find, and I think that's what
very much so.
This family. But one of the great things about Mama is that she doesn't give up, does she?
No, she is feisty. She is feisty.
Yes.
She is determined that she is going to make it, and she's going to give it all she's got.
And in fact, my mother and I were talking after my mother read the book, because there are a lot of books written by women about formidable mothers. And she is a formidable mother. But what's unusual about this book is it's written so forgivingly. And even as we can see how difficult it would be for a little girl to have this unstoppable force of nature for a mother, over and over, other people are saying, you don't know this about her past, or this is what made her, or showing other angles where she becomes deeply sympathetic. And so it's not an angry book about the mother, I think. It's
right.
And in fact, it's not angry towards anyone. Everyone seems to be seen very indulgently or kindly.
Yes, as Serena grows up, she gets the perspective that each person has their own perspective on life, and she really sees that. Yes. And just putting herself in somebody else's shoes gives her that whole new perspective. And so that makes her more forgiving and more understanding and empathetic.
Yes, and it means that she's always moving towards reconciliation at some
Yes.
level and towards understanding of the world.
Yes.
But there's that, again, a heartbreaking line in the middle of the book where I think one of the sisters turns to the other and says, we're further from our dreams now than when we were in Curacao. Mm-hmm. And there are many places where you just compress a very complicated emotion into one sentence like that, and it just reverberates. That probably in Curacao, where they wouldn't have the illusion of fame, fortune is around the corner.
Exactly.
Did you have that feeling when you were growing up? And how did LA strike you when you came here as a young woman?
LA was difficult. LA was very, very difficult. And Curacao is so small and so tight, and all the people know each other. And then to be in LA, it is so sprawling and huge. And so fast. It was a fast culture, and everybody is trying to achieve. The connection was more on achieving than on connecting with each other. And for a young girl growing up, that was really difficult.
Yes. Yes, I feel in this book, Curacao is all about community and tradition. And California is almost all about consumerism, and as you say, everyone flying off in opposite directions. And there's no way of breaching that gap, though I guess Mama, the mother, is kind of trying to turn into American in some ways.
Right. She bought the American dream, and she was gonna. That's why she came. That was her intention of coming. I think with Serena being her last daughter, I think she sort of got that she was alone in the end, because she was all by herself, and she just had Serena, and that was it. And I think she got that, maybe it wasn't the fame and fortune that she was after. She was after the acceptance.
From her daughter.
From her daughter, from all of her children, from the community, from just acceptance in general.
Yes.
She wanted to be accepted and seen and loved. And she thought she had to achieve in order to get that. Yeah. And she wanted her children to achieve in order to get that. And she would do anything to achieve in order to get that love. Yeah. But that Serena figured out that that would almost help. Yes. That was not going to be the route to really getting the acceptance and the love.
Yes. So in fact, the mother becomes more human and more down to earth because she's disappointed in her dreams in some ways.
Yes.
So I was just writing a piece this morning actually about mothers, and there's a new Korean novel called Please Look After Mom.
Yes.
Have you read it?
Yes, I'm just in the middle of it.
Are you enjoying it?
Yes, very much so.
And some of you may know it's a sensation. It's been translated in 20 languages. It's sold 1.5 million copies in Korea. But when it came out in this country last month, it was criticized in the New York Times and NPR because the mother is seen with such love. And the same people who were getting very irked about the tiger mom, 3 months ago, being too tough, are now saying, how can a culture esteem and love its mothers? And it seems that we're caught in a contradiction, or at least in a misunderstanding of many of the cultures in the world.
Right, yeah, because it's a very loving mother, but it's also an unappreciated mother.
Yes, which makes me think of... because in both books, and I'm not spoiling it for you when you read the second half, you only slowly see as the book progresses how much these mothers are giving up for their children and how much they're really working hard, whatever their exterior.
And at a cost. There is a cost there because the connection is lost of just being together and just accepting each other the way they are. Just spending the time together, every moment that is, that we have together. Because anything can happen.
Yeah.
And working so hard to be something somewhere, somehow, in the far distance,
Yes.
To be together and enjoy each other is kind of pointless.
Yeah. And it's interesting because we're sort of used to hearing about how children ultimately learn, I don't have to get straight A's for my parents to love me. But here it's reversed. It's
Yes.
the mother who learns, I don't have to
Yes.
be a millionaire for my... And there's this terrible, poignant dynamic through the book where the mother is always saying, why don't you love me? And the daughter, Serena, says, I do. And the mother says, no, and there's nothing that the daughter can say to get through. And one of the lines that also I love is when I think one of the sisters says to the other, here we are in America and there isn't a single American here.
Yes.
And again, it sounds strange, but whenever my Japanese wife comes to California, from the first time she did 23 years ago, that's always her response. So California means Brad Pitt and Gwyneth Paltrow. And she comes, and California is mostly people who look like her, from Japan and Korea and elsewhere. And she's bewildered, because it never features in the California that's exported around the world. Which is a very specific kind of Baywatch California.
Right. But I think there is also a polarization somehow. I mean, I think there is the communities of immigrants who sort of stick together more. I mean, they have something in common. They just recently came. And I think the Americans that have been here longer are settled more in the background. They're not quite... I think it's a little bit polarized. I don't think... because I think there are totally American communities, and they don't have the immigrants.
Yes, of course, that's true. Yes.
They're completely American, and they have a very different culture. It's a very different culture, and you sort of have to really mold yourself to be part of it. Even the humor is different. Everything, the social, it's different. It's small groups of even large groups, but small groups of women that are all American women. They have a way of speaking to each other and communicating to each other that leaves an immigrant slightly on the outside.
Yes. So in that sense, the girls and their mother are lucky to end up in LA, where there are so many immigrants who have the same questions and have been through the same problems. And then there's scenes in the book where the two teenage girls go off to a place called the Gypsy Camp. Yes. To meet other youngsters. And it seems to me that Gypsy Camp could almost be a description of the whole of LA.
Yes.
Everyone, yes? I mean,
yes.
That was in your mind. You chose that very carefully. Right. Well, it's a beautiful, resonant, because it works as an actual place, but also as a symbol of
coming together.
And how do you see the Curacao part of the novel in your head? It's very strongly, you mentioned Oma before, who's the grandmother, and it's strongly associated with her, isn't it?
Right. And the Curacao culture is a multicultural culture. I mean, just like the United States. And there are people from all over there they're assimilating. Oma herself, to Serena, that was home and that was connection. So every time she wanted to feel, loved and connected, that's where she would go. And it happened to be Curacao. So it became beautiful. And like for most immigrants, the place where they had their connection becomes the beautiful place. Yes. If there were people that they connected there, that becomes, the place of their dreams and so on. But so for her, that was it. Now, when she goes back a number of years later and she found connection here, she realizes, and Oma was gone, Curacao didn't have the same place for her anymore. She had made the shift. Yes. And I think that happens for immigrants. At a certain point, you can let go of the one culture and then, integrate into the new one as you feel settled and connected. But I think it's mostly the connection with other people that you feel, a bond with. I think that's the big thing, and it's hard to find when you don't have people of the same people you've grown up with and had long relationships with.